If you guys enjoy what I do, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it's free and easy to do. Before we get started with today's video, I have an announcement to make. After years of telling other people's stories, I finally released one of my own. My novel Eternal Reign is available now in both ebook and paperback format for those of you who are like me and prefer to collect physical media. You can grab a copy right now on Amazon through the link in the description of this video. And now back to our regularly scheduled program. Recently, a loud roar shook the area, and according to Urianger, that roar came from an unknown primal waking up. Since the Warrior of Light is kind of good at putting down primals, he would obviously be called on because the primal will wake up soon, and it'll cause a lot of problems once it does. Fortunately, someone's already started working on stopping the thing, and she wants your help. Since she's a member of the Scions, granted one that's always off doing her own thing, Menphilia told her that you'd help because volunteering you for stuff is what people tend to do. This person is waiting for you out in Wineport, so you head out there to meet her. Now this story takes place way back in A Realm Reborn, and the person you're meeting is Alisaie, from way back during that horrible era where she and Alphino dressed exactly the same. It's also only the second time you've seen her in game, and the first time you actually work with her, but she's of course already heard about you and how strong you are, and because of what she's trying to do, she knows she'll need that strength. Since the introductions are done, she gets on with telling you what's about to happen. When Bahamut fell, it not only caused the land's appearance to change, it did a lot of damage to the world's ether, causing it to clash at certain points underground, which made a lot of caves form. And one of those caves is located under Castrum Occidens and goes so deep that there's no telling what's down there. The Castrum operates as a research facility and a fortress, one that Gaius Van Belsar is using to study those caverns without anyone interfering, and if the Garleans are interested in something, it'd be stupid to ignore it. With each primal you took down, Alisaie noticed shifts in the ether that came from under the Castrum, and it needs to be checked on as soon as possible because the ether patterns are very similar to the ones that had appeared right before the world-changing calamity. It's been 5 years since Louisoix channeled the power of the 12 to seal Bahamut away, but what he tried to do failed, and both he and the primal vanished. Alisaie wants to find out what happened to her grandfather on that day, and what had caused the changes in the land after the fight. And she thinks those answers can be found in those caves, and she wants you to come with her. Normally she's fine with doing things on her own, but she knows what she can and can't do, and on her own she knows that she can't complete this mission. Since you helped her brother and the Scions, she figures that it'd be a good idea to see if you'd be willing to help her. You agree to help out, and the first thing she needs you to do is sneak into the Castrum and find a safe route into the caverns. When you find the path, she wants you to tell Jabraka, a soldier in Wineport who's also working with her. Since sneaking into an Imperial fortress is not new to the Warrior of Light, it's not exactly hard for him to find a way into the underground caverns. Jabraka is a servant of Alisaie's house, who became a member of the Maelstrom mainly to get information that she can use to help her mistress on her adventures. In other words, the woman's a spy, but none of that's your problem. If she gets caught and hanged, that's on her. All that matters is she goes and gets Alisaie, and the two of you head down into the tunnels. Saying the place is huge would be an understatement, and the giant corrupted ether crystals are all over the place. They appeared all over the world when the ether was altered by the shattered pieces of the artificial moon Bahamut crashing down. The moon itself was made by ancient Allagans to hold Bahamut, and years later the damage it did when it came crashing down can still be seen all around the world. And despite it having crashed 5 years ago, the defenses of Bahamut are still active, which is probably what the Garleans are after. That also means that you'll have to fight your way through them if you want to go any further, which is all in a day's work for the Warrior of Light. As the two of you head deeper into the cave, you see a massive wing that belonged to Bahamut. After Louisoix had tried to seal the primal away and failed, it had disappeared, and apparently now you know where it went. But the thing that's bothering Alisaie is the fact that Bahamut hasn't vanished. Primals lose their physical form when they're beaten, but if Bahamut hasn't vanished, did Louisoix actually beat him? To answer that question, there's more exploring that needs to be done, so the two of you keep moving while someone watches you. Someone who vanishes before you can see him. After fighting your way past a lot of Allagan creations and riding an elevator down for what looks like miles, you and Alisaie find Bahamut's hand, which in comparison to the other members of the First Brood is huge. It's more proof that the Primal didn't lose his form after the calamity, which means the ether that would have been released on the Primal's death couldn't have been the cause of the changes that washed over the world. The caverns seem to go even deeper, so the two of you keep moving, only to get attacked by a dragon that's been fitted with some type of control collar. It's easy enough to deal with now, but it wasn't years ago when these fights were first made. With the dragon dead, Alice and the Warrior of Light come across a machine that Alice thinks she can figure out how to use. She's right, and after pouring some of her ether into it, it powers up and a wall opens, revealing Bahamut's head and heart both connected to a large machine, and the heart is pulsing, which means the dragon is very, very much alive. That also means that Louisoix died for nothing. There's too much that you don't know, so Alice figures that it'll be a good idea to leave for now, but not far from the dragon's head she sees two people, and one of them is her grandfather. She calls out to him, but he ignores her and leaves, and since there's nothing else to do, the two of you leave as well. Surprisingly enough, you pop out in northern Thanalan, quite a good distance away from where you went in, which is weird, but Alice is more concerned about her grandfather being alive and why he ignored her. This mission of hers gave her more questions to answer, so she figures it may be more comfortable to head back to the Waking Sands to figure things out, along with a little help from Urianger. Apparently around the time the two of you made it back to the surface, there was an etheric disturbance out in the Cartano Flats. There haven't been any primal sightings in that area, so it had to be Bahamut that the people were detecting. What they may have been sensing was the primal regenerating. For 5 years he's been slowly drawing in ether and using it to heal himself, which means if he's not dealt with, he could drain the land dry to restore himself, then pick up right where he left off by destroying the world. But it also looks like Louisoix is still around to help hold him off, but Alice won't know for sure until she talks to him. He went deeper into the cave, and since there are 2 more massive pieces of Bahamut that slammed into the ground, they could have made tunnels that will let you explore deeper into the area and track the man down. And Alice is not going to stop until she does, and of course you're going to help. Alice has still been working on the Bahamut and Louisoix problem, and Urianger has been talking to Rambros from the Sons of St. Coinach to see what he can figure out about Bahamut's prison. With Rambros being so knowledgeable about all things Allagan, he does know a little bit about it. Bahamut was made to gather sunlight and to channel it into the Crystal Tower. When the Allagans saw how powerful Bahamut's ether manipulating abilities were, they bound him to Bahamut to use as a power core. The devices that were linked to the half-dead primal are called internment husks, and they bind Bahamut, keeping him from getting away, and they pour enough ether into him to keep him from losing his physical form. He's trapped, unable to die or escape from a prison that feeds on his own ether. The primal had been trapped for centuries, but the prayer of their followers are the things that keep primals in their physical form, which means the Allagan's machine must simulate that somehow. That means if all of the internment husks are turned off, then Bahamut should finally break down into ether. After a little bit of studying and searching, they figure out that there are 3 coils keeping Bahamut alive, and another piece of Bahamut with the same ether signature as the last one you explored was found in the 12's wood. There's a path inside from the North Shroud, and that should lead you to the second internment husk that needs to be shut down. Alice hopes the Warrior of Light will join her for another trip, and if you decide to tag along, you can tell her assistant Anayel out near Falgord Float. She'll be heading there after she makes her own preparations, so she's hoping she'll see you there. Anayel is one of Alice's assistants, who's worked her way up to lieutenant rank in the Twin Adders, so she could basically spy for Alice in the 12's wood. That position lets her do some things without being questioned, including doing a little investigating of the Bahamut fragment. From what she's seen, it's not all that different from the last one that you and Alice wandered through, complete with its own traps and guardians. Granted, she thinks you'll do better seeing it for yourself, and she has someone stationed there that can help you get a glimpse of the place, so you head off to meet him. Alice had told him to expect you, so he fills you in on what they found out. The Empire hadn't found this fragment, which meant no one had cleared a path to it, so all of their time has been spent doing that. They got a few glimpses inside, but all they know is that the master controls are at the bottom of the place behind a lot of Allagan defenses. So the only way to learn more is to explore the place whenever Alice decides to show up. Oddly enough, Alphino is the one who shows up first. Urianger had told him what the Warrior of Light and his sister were doing, and he came out to chat with you for a moment before you went into the second coil. He wanted to tell you that Alice admired Louisoix even more than he did. Since the man died, she made it her personal mission to pick up where he left off and protect Eorzea. That's why she dove headfirst into the coil, but that's not what has Alphinaud worried. He doesn't want her mission to stop Bahamut to turn into a quest to save their dead grandfather. She needs a better reason to fight other than simply fulfilling someone else's dream, because he doesn't think that will be enough for her in the end. But he does think that traveling with you might help her find herself, since it did work wonders for him. But it won't help him if she finds out that he was monitoring her, so he wants you and Anael to keep it a secret that he was even there, since Alice is kinda prone to violence. He leaves before she gets there, and once she arrives, the two of you dive into the second coil of Bahamut. Once the two of you get closer to the entrance, Alice realizes that the corrupted ether warped the air in a way making it hard to see just how the area looks from far away. Up close is a much more dangerous place to try to walk through, but that's not going to slow her down. Not when there's a chance to save her grandfather. Saving her grandfather is at least second in her mind to fighting Bahamut, but it does seem like Alphinaud was right about where her focus lied. There's a lot of stuff blocking you from even getting into the moon fragment, but once the two of you get inside, you see someone in armor that everyone who was alive during the calamity would recognize. Nell Van Darnus, the White Raven, the man who caused the last calamity. But he's very dead, and when he hears Alice say that name, he claims that's not who he is, and he's pretty insulted to be compared to that failure. He calls himself Nell Des Darnus, a name given to him by Bahamut, the being that Nell claims is the one true god. This guy is clearly very tempered, and he warns you that if you keep defiling his god's domain, he will kill you. Then he drops off of a very high cliff and vanishes. The whole encounter was strange, but Alice expected weird, so the two of you hop down onto a massive elevator, where instead of elevator music, you have elegant defenses to keep you entertained. The Warrior of Light deals with them as well as the very creepy snake lady waiting at the end of your ride. With that over and done with, it's deeper down you go. There are paths everywhere, and they are dark, which of course lead to more horrible Allegan monstrosities. They said that Allegans were really good at making all types of chimeras and such, and literally millions of the things were housed inside of Dalamud to keep the Allegans' enemies from releasing Bahamut. That was likely a deterrent for the Mericidians, who had summoned the Warring Triad in their battle with the Allegans, which led to the Void Scent being summoned with the power of the Crystal Tower and so on and so forth. While those defenses were meant for them, they work just as well as slowing you down too. But the Warrior of Light cuts a path through the defenses that are in his way, and he and Alice make their way down to the heart of the coil, to a place that looks exactly like the fields of Cartno where Nell Van Darnus died, complete with a floating Dalamud overhead. Nell is there, and he claims that the place will be your grave since you kept destroying Bahamut's things. He starts to channel the power to do something probably nasty to you, but Alice shoots first, knocking off his helmet and revealing that this person is actually a woman, which the real Nell definitely wasn't. Apparently when the man had died and his soul was on its way to the ethereal sea, Bahamut had snatched his ether and remade him into the woman you see before you. He ordered this remade Nell to destroy his enemies and gave her the power to do just that. It gives her a much more dragon-like form, and she turns all of that power on you. When you finally bring her down, the illusion that made the area look like the calamity fades, and the woman not only turns back into her normal form, but she's no longer tempered. She also claims to be the real Nell Van Darnus now, but she knows that the body she's in isn't her real one, and her mind's a little cloudy, but she refuses to be tempered again. Normally it's all but impossible to get untempered, which means Bahamut must have released Nell since she's near death and useless to him now. Nell thinks it's funny that she ended up being controlled by one of the creatures she had hoped to get rid of, but tempered or not, she knows with absolute certainty that she had initiated the Meteor Project on her own. Before she fades away, Alice wants the woman to tell her what really happened to the world and her grandfather after the calamity. Nell thinks it's funny that Louisoix's grandkid had a hand in her death and release from the Primal's control, and she lets Alice know that she'll get her answers if she keeps exploring the coils, but she probably won't like what she finds. Before she can say more, a spear made of light stabs her in the chest and puts an end to her for good. With her dead and out of the way, the two of you head off to finish your mission, and what you find is Bahamut has been regenerating a lot faster than you all had expected. That's kinda bad, but Alice hopes that turning off this machine will slow down the process, at least enough to give you time to find the last one. She shuts it down and the two of you get ready to head back to the surface, only for Louisoix to show up and attack Alice. He wants her to stop what she's doing because he won't let her keep interfering with Bahamut. She of course refuses to stop, so he goes to kill her, but the Warrior of Light steps in the way. The fact that he was really gonna kill her, that and the glowing red eyes, lets her know that Louisoix is just as tempered as Nell had been, and he decides to let you leave for now, but he promises that he will kill you both if you come back. With that, he leaves, and Alice is forced to admit that her grandfather is truly dead before the two of you leave and head back to the Waking Sands to let Urianger know what's happened and the plan for what to do next. After hearing about the fake Louisoix and Nail that you had to fight, Urianger thinks it may be for the best if Alice left this mission to the Warrior of Light, but of course there's no way she'd abandon the job. There is something that she's worried about. She doesn't know if Nail Van Darnus and Louisoix are the only two thralls that Bahamut had working for him. Nail had said something about Bahamut's beloved children that Alice had assumed was meant for the Guardians of Dalamud, but she could have been talking about other mortals that the Primal had enslaved. If that's the case, then you have to deal with them before you can shut down the last coil, because if even one of them lives, they'll just be able to summon Bahamut again, and she's willing to wipe them all out, even if that means having to put down her grandfather with her own hands. Alice has been having some problems with her mission with the coils of Bahamut, and she decides to ask Urianger for a bit of his overly complicated sage advice. Bahamut's regenerating pretty fast, and there are still 2 internment husks that need to be turned off. She's found where they are, but she doesn't know how to get to them. Once you do manage to figure out how to get inside, you'll still have to deal with all of the Allegan tech, as well as whatever other guards Bahamut has enthralled. That includes Louisoix. But those problems only matter once you find a way inside. Urianger figures that the best way to do that is for Alice to take the Warrior of Light with her to the fragments of Dalamud, since him just being there tends to cause things to happen. While the two of you do that, Urianger will try to figure out a way inside using his own methods. Since she trusts the Warrior of Light, she agrees. There are 2 remaining fragments of Dalamud, one in eastern Thanalan and another near Mordona. Alice's left some of her people in each of the areas looking for a way inside. It's been a while, so they may have gotten lucky, so the two of you head to see Dex by the burning wall. The man's excited to meet the Warrior of Light, but unfortunately he hasn't managed to find a way into the fragment. He can see the entrance, but there's no way to get through all of the corrupted ether crystals. Since the Thanalan path is a bust, the two of you head off to Mordona to see if Sinis has had a little bit of better luck. That may not be the case, since apparently Dex has lost contact with his brother. Since there are a lot of monsters in the area, he could very well be dead, so the Warrior of Light and Alice race off to hopefully save him. The man was injured but not dead, but sadly the piece of Dalamud near him is impenetrable too. While Alice's assistants haven't found a way to make it into the place, a call from Urianger lets the two of you know that he's found one. He wants the two of you to meet him at the Cerulean processing plant in northern Thanalan so he can show you what he means. There are no fragments of Dalamud in the area, but there is a path inside, one that the two of you have used before every time you'd come out of the coils. An ethereal stream had taken the two of you out of the coils, and Urianger has figured out that the same stream that you rode out away from the first interment husk on is connected to each of the others through a giant machine. Him and his assistant figured that out, as well as how to travel to one of the areas that you hadn't explored yet. You'll be using a modified aetherite for your trip, but since it's untested, the trip could kill you both, or have you reappear with swapped body parts or a whole lot of other unpleasant things. That's a risk that Alice is willing to take, as is Urianger's assistant, who turns out to be Alphino. She's not happy that Urianger told her brother about her mission, and she promises to have words with him later once Bahamut is dealt with. He's cool with that, but since Louisoix is both of the twins' grandfather, he thought it only fair if Alphino knew what was going on too. As long as he doesn't interfere with her continuing her grandfather's mission of protecting Eorzea, she doesn't really care. But Alphino is still worried about the fact that she's fighting for someone else's goal and doesn't have a clue what she really wants for herself. Alice obviously gets angry at him for questioning her, something that she's only slightly grown out of over time. But what she doesn't understand is that Alphino isn't against her fight. He just wants her to be able to answer the question of why she's doing it. And while it may not seem all that important, it is, especially in a world filled with primals and tempering. The two of them would argue back and forth about it forever, which is what siblings tend to do, but Bahamut regenerating is a more serious problem, so the twins stop arguing, and Alice agrees to let Alphino tag along, as long as he follows orders, so the three of you make your way into the final coil of Bahamut. It's Alphino's first time seeing the insides of Dalamud, so naturally he's excited, but Alice is just happy that the little teleportation trick sent you all to a working interment husk. Since there's no telling how much more Bahamut has regenerated since the last time you had all been there, that means you need to shut it down quickly. There are plenty of containers holding Allagan creations, so it's likely that this trip won't be any easier than the last ones. The monsters are just as brutal as they always were, but as the Warrior of Light cuts a path through them, the group comes across some Allagan containers holding some very unexpected creatures, dragons. A lot of them. They knew that the Allagans had figured out how to control dragons, but they hadn't thought they had locked away so many. They had so many other guardians that they wouldn't have really needed the dragons, but that's not what they have them for. It doesn't take long for Alice to realize that the reason the Allagans had so many dragons imprisoned was to use them to maintain Bahamut's physical form. That means all of those dragons have to die, or the threat of Bahamut won't end with his death. It's also likely that the dragon woke up and tried to destroy everything, because mortals seem to keep finding ways to do cruel things to the winged lizards that are the size of buildings. The fact that everyone keeps messing with them sounds dumber and dumber when you really pay attention to just how big the lead dragons are. Regardless of the fact that the Bahamut problem was brought on by mortals, he still needs to be put down, and since the machine keeping him locked up is likely the same one keeping the dragons alive, turning it off will solve both problems. So the three of you keep moving deeper into the coil. When you all reach Bahamut, you see that he is very close to being fully awake, so Alice goes to turn off the internment husk. As a surprise to no one, Louisoix appears to block your path. Alice has finally accepted the fact that he's not really her grandfather, but that's all talk because she's still affected by his words, especially when he questions her cause. He says that they only think of Bahamut as a villain because of what happened in the moments when he broke free, but they don't know the whole story. During the Third Astral Era, the Allagans had invaded Mericidia. Since they couldn't beat them, the Mericidians prayed to Bahamut, reviving him as a powerful god, but instead of defeating the Allagans, he got imprisoned by them. Louisoix had summoned the 12 to help with his people's problems in a very similar way that the Mericidians had summoned Bahamut. So his question is, why were the 12 celebrated while Bahamut is hated? It's hypocrisy to him, even though it probably has something to do with the fact that the 12 didn't try to kill the people, which kinda ruins his argument. But after what the Allagans have done, the only way that the dragons will ever know peace is if the mortals are wiped out entirely. And after everything they've done to the dragons, this mind-controlled Louisoix thinks that wiping out the mortals would be justice. That's the complete opposite of what the real Louisoix believed, since he believed that people were always worth saving, but now he thinks that it was foolish to believe that mortals even deserve to be saved at all. They can't stand together on anything since they start out by arguing about what direction they should face. The one thing that history shows is that if there's anything for mortals to argue about, they will find it. He even points out how the twins argue about everything and use their resources to guide people into doing what they want, which makes them no different than the Allagans. He had given the twins matching grimoire to bring them closer together, but even that had been a waste of effort. Alphinaud admits that Louisoix is right about them, but hearing his grandfather talk about how bad mortals are when the man was the one who cared the most about people just seems fake. He wants to know if Louisoix really believes what he's saying, or is it all because he's a thrall of Bahamut? Or is it because of a third option? Has Louisoix himself become a primal? Alice hadn't even thought of that possibility, but it seems to be the truth. Somehow during the fight with Bahamut, Louisoix acquired the powers of a primal himself, but if you want to know how, you'll have to fight him, so he turns into his primal form, that of a phoenix, and attacks, which is why the Warrior of Light is there. He faces off against Louisoix, who is very much alive and not a creation of Bahamut at all, and manages to bring him down after quite a few slashes with his sword. Just like when you beat Nail, beating Louisoix broke him free from Bahamut's control. He is dying, but at least he can spend the last bit of time that he has as himself. The twins are happy to get a true reunion with their grandfather, although Alphinaud does feel a little bad for how he had talked to the man while he was tempered. Louisoix wasn't offended, and he's actually proud of the boy for figuring out what he'd become, which leads him to tell you all what really happened in the fight with Bahamut. When Bahamut had broken free from Dalamud during the Battle of Carteneau, Louisoix had channeled the power of the 12 to help him make an ether prison for Bahamut. It didn't work. The primal was too strong, so he broke free. Louisoix didn't have much else that he could do other than use everything he had to do as much damage as he could and hope that the problem could be dealt with permanently by someone else in the future. But things didn't turn out like that. When the ether prison he had made was broken, the scattered ether filled the sky and combined with all of the prayers of everyone who was fighting below, them praying for a savior, while Louisoix wished for a way to save the land from the calamity, combined with the ether and turned him into the primal phoenix, which is a symbol of rebirth. Since he was fully powered up, he hit Bahamut with everything he had and destroyed his body, which caused the ether to fall into the land to start the process of healing the world. That's why the game was called A Realm Reborn, and why this story was clearly supposed to be a part of the MSQ. Louisoix thought that everything was finished, so he let go of his new power so it could go back to the land too, but Bahamut wasn't dead, so as the power left Louisoix, Bahamut took him. His body still had enough of Phoenix's power to keep Bahamut alive and start his regeneration, and that's where his service to Bahamut began. That's why Eorzea didn't heal the way that it was supposed to. While there are so many areas with corrupted ether crystals, it all comes back to the conflict between Louisoix and Bahamut. And since the Primal is still alive, he has been eating the land's ether. He ate everything that Louisoix had released and is sucking it all out of the world so that he can fully restore his giant primal form and finish what he had started. Normally he wouldn't have been able to survive with all of the damage he had taken, but since the elegant technology of Bahamut was helping to hold him in place, as long as any piece of him survived, he could live. The pieces of Bahamut have been slowly digging their way through the ground toward their prisoner, which is why there are so many pathways underground that no one knew about. And had Alisaie not been looking, no one would have discovered this until Bahamut wiped them all out. Since he can't do it himself, Louisoix tells the Warrior of Light to finish off Bahamut, because if he recovers, he won't just kill all mortals. Even the dragons won't survive the calamity he'll cause. Of course, the Warrior of Light agrees, so Louisoix turns off the internment husk and opens a portal that will take you all to the last one. He's finally fading away, but as a last act after telling the twins that they need to find their own purpose in life and reason to fight, especially Alisaie, he gives them the last bit of power that he has as a semi-primal and vanishes. With him gone, the three of you head to the final husk, but the moment Alisaie tries to turn it off, Bahamut, in his incomplete form, still has enough power to attack. Lucky for the twins, they have just enough power between the two of them, since Louisoix buffed them up a bit, to hold off the attack while the Warrior of Light attacks Bahamut's core. The Primal has a smaller version of himself in there acting as a last line of defense, but because this wasn't done way back when the fight was supposed to happen, he gets wrecked. With Bahamut beaten, Alisaie turns off the last machine that's keeping him alive, and the Primal that reshaped the world as well as the dragons that were keeping him there are all finally put to rest. Now that it's done, Alisaie wants to know if Alphinaud had always known what their grandfather had become. He had a theory, but he wasn't positive. He had thought it was possible after hearing some of the stories people had told about what they'd seen at Cartano, and that was why he'd been worried that Alisaie may have been being tempered by him, and he'd hoped he could help prevent it. It turns out that she was fine, so he doesn't have anything to worry about, but he does want to know if she plans on telling people what they found out about the Primal Phoenix. She won't, because she knows that if she does, people would try to summon him to fix the world, which would suck all of the ether out that's being used to heal it, which would do the exact opposite of what they want. She won't have her grandfather being brought back as an ether-draining primal who would destroy the world that he had died to protect, so the story will die with the three of you. With that settled, you all leave the coils for the last time, and even though she doesn't plan on telling the world about her grandfather, she will recommend that they seal off the fragments of Bahamut, just in case there's something there that can give people a hint of what happened. Well, Alphinaud will handle that part since he's better at politics, while Alisaie heads off down her own path, and she promises that even though the world won't know how you saved them from Bahamut and freed Louisoix, she will never forget, and the next time you meet, she hopes to be an equal to the Warrior of Light. While out in Dravania, Y'shtola and Cid get to see firsthand as a group of goblins activate a giant machine that is not a machine at all. It's actually a primal. The two of them are still out there trying to learn more about the strange primal when the Warrior of Light shows up. The goblins of Idleshire are worried because the primal is big enough to crush their entire settlement, but Y'shtola shows up right on time to tell Slowfix to calm down. Did I mention how much I love the different goblin names? Y'shtola's glad that you're there because the situation is pretty serious. The shifting of the ether in the area proves that the big machine is in fact a primal. The good news is it stopped moving when it had barely popped out of the river. The bad news is there's no telling when it will start moving again, or what it will do once it does. The other problem is the thing is draining the ether from the surrounding area very fast and will leave the area uninhabitable in a few days if it's not stopped. Slowfix definitely doesn't want that since the goblins all only recently found a place to call home. Y'shtola doesn't plan on letting them lose their home either, so the Scions of the Seventh Dawn are officially on the job. But since this mechanical primal is so big, they can't just take over and deal with it alone. Attacking it will have to be done in two ways. Of course, there's the Warrior of Light's usual stabby stabby boom boom method, but Y'shtola also wants to try cutting off its ether supply by separating it from the land. For that, she plans on getting help from Master Matoya, which will of course take time because the old woman wouldn't rush to do anything even if the world was ending, which is why Y'shtola has Cid keeping an eye on the primal. Since it is a machine, he'll probably be the best person to help you deal with it anyway. As expected, if the thing wakes up again, Y'shtola wants you to do everything you can to keep it away from Idleshire. With the plan made, Y'shtola heads off to talk to Matoya, while Slowfix sends the Warrior of Light to talk to Backrix, who should know where Cid is. You don't have to wait long to find Cid, because he shows up to talk to Backrix as soon as you get there. He knew the situation was bad, but once the Warrior of Light tells him just how fast the primal is draining the land's ether, he realizes that it's way worse than he thought. From what he's learned from Backrix, it's very likely that the Illuminati are behind this. They know how to summon a primal, and they're crazy enough to do it. Every story has some version of the Illuminati, and the group in Final Fantasy XIV is made up of goblins who want to control all of the world's technology and knowledge, and they have no problem killing people to get what they want. And since it seems like they're actually inside of the primal, the odds of them killing a lot of people are pretty high. Destroying the thing won't be all that easy since you have to find a way inside, deal with the Illuminati, then destroy the primal's engine, which will only work if it's actually a machine. And there's the problem of the barrier that's around the thing that has to be dealt with too. From what Backrix says, the barrier was there long before the primal. It popped up 3 years ago after a big earthquake. Roundrocks, another goblin, was there and she saw the whole thing. She's Slowfix's daughter and spends way more time collecting junk than the other goblins. In short, she's a hoarder. Young she may be, but she remembers exactly what she saw. The mechanical primal had rose up out of the water, which caused the earthquakes, which means this isn't the first time someone summoned that particular primal, but they failed the last time. So Cid's question is, was it the Illuminati who had summoned it before, or was it someone else entirely? A goblin that you all know well, who is apparently an expert on the Illuminati, Brayflox Alltalks, shows up, and Cid decides to talk to her to get some information on your enemies, while the Warrior of Light goes to help Biggs and Wedge find a way into the giant primal. While you're all making your plans, an Al Ra with the scar on her face watches you from a distance. The barrier is posing a problem for Biggs and Wedge, but when the primal came out of the water, it put one of its hands on shore through the barrier, giving the two of them an entry point into the big machine. Of course it's locked, and there doesn't seem to be a keyhole or anything, so Wedge tapped into the Illuminati's communications and is trying to see if they'll mention a way to get into the thing. He's getting a signal, but it's just repeating a weird pattern over and over. Wedge is positive that it's a code, and the Illuminati came up with a crystal that they use to decrypt their messages. All Wedge needs is one of those, and he's positive that he can figure out the message. Unfortunately, he doesn't know where to find one, but Redbrix thinks that Roundrocks might have one in her pile of stuff. Wedge has built a device that would detect the crystal if it's nearby, so it gives it to you and sends you to go sift through Roundrocks' stash. The goblin does have one of the crystals, but it's her favorite treasure, so she doesn't really want to give it to you. But since you're doing something important, you can have it as long as you bring it back. So the Warrior of Light brings it to Wedge, and the message is immediately decoded. They're talking about some nonsense, but that's clearly another code. Apparently they made a failsafe just in case someone got their hands on one of their crystals. The scar-faced Al Ra shows up, and she says that she can crack the code if you're willing to make a deal with her. Her name is Mide and she's a treasure hunter. She wants something that's inside of the giant, and she'll help you get inside if you help her make it out with the item. She's well aware of the fact that the Illuminati are inside of the primal, which is why she came to you. Strength in numbers and all that. None of you have any reason to object, so she tells Biggs how to open the hatch into the machine, and it actually works. The fact that the Illuminati were announcing the code to enter the place seems a bit weird to Cid, but it opened the door so he'll go with it. Unfortunately, Brayflox didn't know all that much about the Illuminati's plan or the primal, which means you'll just have to learn about it while you explore. Since the thing is technically a giant machine, if the Warrior of Light and his team follows the pipes and wires, they should be able to reach the core. Mide doesn't care as long as she gets to come with you. Cid would join you, but he has one thing to do first, so the Warrior of Light heads into the giant primal to deal with the Illuminati. The path into the primal is guarded by some very large and heavily armed machines that the Warrior of Light makes short work of, which opens the way forward for Mide and an unexpected Roundrocks who couldn't help but to sneak in after you in hopes of finding new treasures. The machine bits aren't what Mide is looking for, so she doesn't care if the goblin takes them. Apparently what she's after wasn't in the area at all, something that's pointed out by a group of newcomers who show up. It's the Illuminati, and their leader, Quick Thinks All Thoughts. That has to be the best goblin name ever. Mide pulls a gun on them, but one of the goblins says that they all have explosives on their backs, so shooting them isn't a good idea. Another of the goblins taunts you all, saying that the Enigma Codex is gone and they've already started the Alexander Initiative, which is way more than he was supposed to say since none of you had a clue what they were planning at all. It's very likely that Quick Thinks was going to kill the blabbermouth goblin, but Mide takes the opportunity to shoot at them, causing their packs to explode. And since they're so far away from you, the explosions only hurt the goblins, which gives you all time to run, but not before Round Rocks asks, what is the Enigma Codex? It turns out that's the treasure that Mide is after, but you'll have to try for it at a safer time. Back safe and sound at your camp, you let Biggs know what happened. After you tell him about your run-in with the Illuminati, he figures that Alexander might actually be the Primal's name, and since you didn't find its core, that means you have to do more searching, but at least you all managed to make it out of there alive. Biggs is ready to take another crack at finding the core whenever you are, and you should probably get started soon, since Wedge is hearing chants about death to the Uplanders coming through the Link Pearl. Seems like you may have started a war with the Illuminati after your last encounter, so it'll probably be more guards blocking your way the next time. As expected, when the Warrior of Light continues his trip into the core, the path is blocked by an army of goblins and their deadly tech that takes a lot of sword swipes to bring down. A lot of explosions later, the battle is done, and Sid, Mide, and Round Rock show up to admire your handiwork. We all knew that Sid couldn't avoid seeing the place for himself, so it was only a matter of time before he showed up in person. Sid's curious about what Mide is searching for, and she doesn't even try to hide it. She wants the Enigma Codex, which is a book that holds the work of one of the greatest masters of technology from a little over 100 years ago. It has plans inside for everything from machines that can run for a century to things that can make better cheese. Even selling a single page from the book would be worth millions. The most important bit of info in the book, however, is a plan for a walking citadel. That's the form that the Illuminati's Primal took, since they used the book's knowledge to summon it, a fact that Mide already knew since she'd both seen and read from the Enigma Codex. The Citadel was meant to be a fully self-contained city with places to live and grow crops, so the people who lived there would never have to leave. Add to that the fact that the place was nearly impregnable and able to move back and forth, it became the perfect fortress, one that was meant to take the world's best and brightest to all the corners of the world so they could learn the mysteries of creation, all from inside of the fortress named Alexander. The Illuminati are hoping to use the fortress to gather knowledge in the same way, but this version of Alexander is actually a primal, which means walking it around the world would leave a trail of etherless wastelands in its wake, which adds to the extreme need to stop the Illuminati as soon as possible. There seems to be a problem on the Alexander front, but Sid's already working on fixing it. The communications that Wedge has been picking up have been bugging him for a while, because something about them just don't make sense. The Illuminati have already made a base inside of Alexander, which means they had to have found a way through the barrier. So why did they need to use the hatch that's sticking outside of the barrier at all? And why are they sending out coded messages on how to unlock a door that they both don't need and should have already unlocked? The answer is simple. The Illuminati must have a spy in Idleshire that was using the hatch to go back and forth. The spy probably knows that you've all broken the code, which means he or she won't be able to use the hatch for a while. That means the spy will need to make contact with the Illuminati soon, so Sid had everyone clear the area around the entrance so you all could watch for the spy, then follow him. Before the words are fully out of his mouth, Wedge gets a call from Redbrick saying that Brayflox went inside of Alexander, but there's no way that she's a spy for the Illuminati, so someone had to be pretending to be her. Whatever the case, you all race off to find out what exactly is going on. You all chase the goblin through more of the giant primal fortress, fighting your way past monsters and what looks like a human-shaped Capri Sun, which has to be the strangest security guard ever, before the Warrior of Light, Sid, Mide, and Round Rocks catch up to the spy. Quick Thinks All Thoughts and a few of the Illuminati members arrive to give the spy a chance to report that whatever the Illuminati was searching for has been found. Then they shoot him. That's not really the best way to inspire loyalty in your subordinates, but Quick Thinks isn't really worried about anything other than completing his mission of bringing the world into harmony by weeding out the useless parts. He knows that Alexander will suck the life out of everyone outside of it, but those the Illuminati choose will be safe inside its walls. They will get to live on as masters of knowledge who will rebuild the world better than it was before. He figures that the smartest Uplanders will join him, and the stupid ones don't deserve to see his perfect world anyway. Instead of killing the goblin like he should have, the Warrior of Light just watches Quick Thinks leave. Sid is convinced that the goblins are insane, but Mide doesn't see it all so black and white as that. They are following the plans laid out in the Enigma Codex, but they are rushing the process, which is why it seems so bad. That part doesn't make the Illuminati crazy. The fact that they're crazy makes them crazy, but anyone could do a lot of harm in an attempt to do good if they aren't careful, and that doesn't necessarily make them crazy. She's clearly not talking about the goblins, but whatever or whoever she's thinking about, she's not interested in saying more at the moment. But she does think that she can stop Alexander if you can get her to the core. From what she read in the Enigma Codex, she knows that the core is nearby, but she's not sure how close you are to it. Round Rocks has been paying more attention to the path that you traveled, and since the core is in the chest, she's able to point you all in the right direction, but it definitely won't be unguarded, so you all head out to get prepared to charge into the core. You don't have long, because if the Illuminati fully wake Alexander, they will be all but unstoppable, so the Warrior of Light repairs his gear and heads into the core with Mide. It's guarded by yet another very sturdy machine, one that takes a lot more punishment before it's taken down, but after hitting it enough, it explodes just like everything else. With the way clear, Biggs and Wedge join the Warrior of Light and Mide at the very large heart of Alexander. True to her word, Mide climbs on top of the core and opens it with a few button presses, but Quick Thinks All Thought shows up, admitting that maybe you're all smarter than he gave you credit for, but he doesn't seem all that upset about what you've done. From what Wedge sees, the goblin rides deeper into Alexander, talking like he actually won, almost like he wanted you all to deactivate the core. What's even more odd is Quick Think shows up alone, like he'd sent his honor guard off to do something more important even than watching his back. The thought hits Wedge that the goblin might have sent his minions off to idle shower while you were all away, so you all race out of the primal only to find that the Illuminati did attack the place. It was a strange attack according to Red Bricks, because they only took useless junk that they stole from Round Rocks, which means what they took probably was anything but useless, and they made it a point to take everything that she'd gathered. They may have even taken her if she hadn't been out looking for more stuff during the attack. It's Sid and Biggs to the rescue. They show up with one very unconscious goblin thief as well as Round Rocks' possessions. Biggs had figured that the thief might be in the area, and with a little searching they found him. But the question is, what exactly were the Illuminati looking for in Round Rocks' stash? They clearly hadn't found it, otherwise they wouldn't have still been hanging around, which makes the little goblin wonder if what they were after was the stone that she loaned to you. She'd never taken it out of Wedge's machine, so it wasn't in her stash. She'd found it by the Charlian ruins when Alexander first appeared, something that Mide was completely unaware of. When she takes out the stone and it glows, Mide recognizes it as a piece of the Enigma Codex, which means the only reason the Illuminati hasn't proceeded with their plan is because they don't have the completed codex, meaning they will definitely be back, and you and the mysterious Mide will have to deal with them. After doing a bit of thinking, Round Rocks, after realizing that the glowstone is the thing that Mide has been searching for this entire time, decides to give it to the Al Ra, and since there aren't many people who could take it from the Warrior of Light, the goblin gives it to him so he can give it to Mide. The treasure hunter is usually staring at Alexander from nearby, so it isn't hard to track her down. Mide is flattered that the goblin is willing to give away her most precious possession, and at first she wasn't gonna accept it, but she decides that it would be better in the hands of someone who could actually keep it safe. Round Rocks isn't exactly what you'd call a fighter, so Mide decides to hold on to it, even though to her, the piece of the Enigma Codex is nothing more than any other rock. When Round Rocks held it, the stone had let out a flash of light, but that hadn't happened when anyone else touched it, not even the Warrior of Light. The Codex is protected by magic that keeps it from being read by anyone who doesn't believe in what it says down to their very core. It's very rare to find a person that can actually read it, which means if the Illuminati find out that Round Rocks can, they'll take her. Mide figures that the best way to keep Round Rocks safe would be for her to lure the Illuminati away with the piece of the Codex that they want so much. They'll be hunting for her, and won't be thinking about Round Rocks, but Mide still wants you to watch out for the little goblin just in case while she's away. Backrix comes to get you, because apparently something's been bothering Wedge, so you head back to camp to see what's bothering the Lalafell. Apparently the Illuminati are getting ready to do something big, because Ishtola sent a message saying that Alexander's starting to draw a lot more ether from the area. Not to mention the fact that the goblins are gathering a lot of explosives and other stuff likely to build another big weapon. In short, things are pretty bad, so you all need to attack them before they can finish, and Wedge already has a plan, one that of course has the Warrior of Light leading the assault. Biggs has already scouted out the area that he wants to attack from, so you and Wedge head there to get things started. Biggs was expecting Sid to show up, but he hadn't thought that Y'shtola would come too. Since the ether is being drained at a super high rate, she obviously needed to be there to help. From what she can see, Alexander has absorbed a whole lot of ether already, but there's a different kind of energy coming from inside of the barrier. Figuring out what this new energy is will have to wait. For now, whatever the Illuminati are doing needs to be stopped before they can get it fully started, and Wedge has built a device that should help with that. He calls it the Electro Jammer number 3, which is weird since it's apparently the first of its kind. If it works the way that he says it will, it should disrupt all of the Illuminati's communication devices, making it a lot harder for them to organize a defense when you all attack. The device has a little more kick to it than everyone expected, and the explosion that it makes either causes Alexander to lift its other hand, or it was about to do that anyway, and Wedge's timing was just a coincidence. Either way, Wedge refuses to take the blame for the primal moving. The good news, according to Y'shtola, the primal is still asleep. Even better, it moving created a new way for you all to head inside, which means it's time for the Warrior of Light to do his thing. While he does that, Sid and Y'shtola are going to go and tell Matoya what just happened. While you all get ready to make your move, Quick Thinks All Thoughts watches from above, saying that everything is playing out exactly how it was written. The Illuminati weren't all that unprepared for your attack, and apparently their experiments don't stop at modifying just machines. One of the goblins who manages to take the title of best named goblin in the game, Ratfinks Twinkledinks, has done quite a few modifications to himself that makes him very not fun to fight. But the Warrior of Light and his crew of adventurers bring down the goblin and his minions. With the attack being a success, the Warrior of Light meets back up with Biggs and Wedge at the base camp, only for them to let him know that there's another problem. While they were patrolling the area, they saw Mide talking to the Illuminati. Not only that, she gave them the piece of the Enigma Codex before going into Alexander with them. It all looks really bad, but it starts to look a lot less like Mide's actually a traitor when Quick Think shows up to the camp talking about how your new friend had been working with them from the very beginning. Him trying so hard to convince you that Mide's a traitor does the exact opposite, but after the Illuminati leave, Bakrix says that there is some truth to what the goblin said. Bakrix had looked into what had happened 3 years ago and found out that a group of Al Ra treasure hunters had gone to explore the ruins near the Thaliac River only to die during the earthquakes that had come as a part of Alexander's first summoning. It's likely that Mide was one of those treasure hunters, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she had something to do with the summoning, except for the fact that Bakrix did some reading from a book that he got from a Sharlayan, and it said that the person who had written the Enigma Codex 100 years ago was a blue-haired Zayla just like Mide. She can't be the only blue-haired Zayla out there, and instead of speculating, Round Rocks runs off to find the woman to get answers straight from her. Wedge chases after the goblin to keep her safe, while the Warrior of Light continues his attack on the Illuminati, so it's back into Alexander we go. The goblins are definitely ready for your next attack, and they've put together a much more deadly defense, but that doesn't stop the Warrior of Light and his crew. When he makes it back to the camp after the battle, Mide is there, and she admits that she did meet up with the Illuminati, but what she gave them was just a rock that she found, not the Codex. But Quick Thinks hadn't been lying about what he said. Mide had not only been working with the Illuminati, she had taught them how to summon the Primal in the first place. She had planned on using them to complete her own goal, the same way she was planning on using all of you. The author of the Enigma Codex had been an ancestor of hers, and the goal of creating a perfect world had been a mission for some of her tribe for years. They had worked in secret to bring it about, and those ideals in some corrupted fashion have taken over the Illuminati. The leader of Mide's group had been very charismatic, and Mide had fallen in love with him, which made her even more eager to make his dream come true. That's why she didn't hesitate when he wanted to summon a primal, and 3 years ago they had tried to do it. The summoning went horribly wrong. Alexander killed most of Mide's friends and dragged the man she loved into the core of the machine. Not knowing what else to do, Mide made the barrier to seal Alexander away, but while she was doing that, the Codex exploded and the primal disappeared. One of the pieces cut her across the face, which is how she got that scar, and that moment showed her just how stupid their plan had been. It only took the loss of all of her friends for her to learn that lesson, but it still doesn't explain why she decided to help the Illuminati summon the thing again, or help you all get inside of it for that matter. Her reasons are simple and kind of insane. She did it all because she hopes it will let her see the man she loves again. She thinks his soul is still inside of the primal. Telling her how dumb her plan was is not the best idea, so Biggs decides to find out just how bad things would get if the Codex was made whole. If the codex is repaired, it would in fact be able to completely control the primal, but you need the complete codex and someone who can read it. With both of those, Alexander could instantly take anyone to wherever they wanted to go, likely draining the life out of the place in the process. Mide used to be able to read the codex, but since that day 3 years ago, she's lost the ability. Only Round Rocks has the gift as far as she knows, meaning that the child is the key to controlling the primal. And right on cue, Wedge runs up to say that the little goblin's been taken by the Illuminati. With Round Rocks being captured, the Warrior of Light and his allies race back into Alexander to find her. Quickthinks decides to deal with you himself, and he uses a lot of tech to do it, but he's still no match for you. So he tries to fly away, but his damaged machine explodes. It's highly unlikely that he didn't survive, and there's still a lot more stuff you have to fight your way through to free the goblin, so you all head back to camp to get more supplies for the next fight. While you fought Quickthinks, Mide mapped out the rest of Alexander's interior, so she knows where you need to go, but Backrix doesn't trust the woman. Since she was involved with the original summoning of Alexander, Backrix doesn't know if she's trying to help you all or simply finish her own mission. The goblin has a point, and Mide understands why some of you might not fully trust her, but even though she's the last of her group, the whole Build a Perfect World mission was never really her dream. She was willing to put that same amount of effort into any cause, as long as she was able to do it with the people she cared about. She honestly can't understand why she had ever been able to read the Enigma Codex in the first place, since she wasn't all that dedicated to its teachings. In short, the dream of a perfect world died with her leader. As for Alexander, the part you've been exploring is called Mide, named after an ancient king who had asked the gods for the power to turn whatever he touched into gold. They gave him what he asked for, and he liked it until he accidentally turned the woman he loved into a statue. What he wanted the most ended up costing him everything. That same story can be applied to Mide and her people. The hunt for what they wanted most ended up costing them everything. Now all she wants is to talk to the man she loved just one more time, nothing else. Now that she's told you all her goal, she wants to get back to the important mission of saving Round Rocks, and she has a plan. Alexander has 3 main sections, each with their own core. The Warrior of Light has cleared a path to the core of Mide, but the Illuminati definitely have set up a strong defense to keep you from destroying it. Round Rocks is most likely being kept in Alexander's upper body, but the Illuminati have the path there locked, so you have to destroy the core to shut down the primal. If you break the primal, the Illuminati will have to fix it before they can use Round Rocks, which will give you all more time to save her, especially since they'll probably have to gather more crystals to get the primal back up and running. With the plan made, it's time to get back into the primal and fight the Illuminati. They have indeed put together a powerful set of machines to bar your path, but the Warrior of Light and his adventurer allies take them down, clearing a path to the core. Like before, Mide shuts it down, only for Quickthinks and a lot of goblins to show up. Wedge taunts him for not fighting you alone again since he lost the last time, but Quickthinks claims that he lost on purpose, just like he let you shut down the core on purpose. Because according to him, he knows the future, and he knows that one of you have the piece of the Enigma Codex that he wants. Biggs and Wedge both pretend to have it, while the Warrior of Light and Mide hop on the elevator to escape with the Codex. But proving that he might actually know a bit about the future, Quickthinks parks his hover platform in the perfect spot for it to fall into his lap when your platform lurches and makes the Enigma Codex fall right out of Mide's pocket. With what he wanted in hand, the Illuminati leave you all to ponder just how Quickthinks got the better of you all, and now you have to figure out how to get the Codex and Round Rocks back. Back at the camp, things get even more strange. Backrix is confused about why you're all back so soon. He just saw you all leave a few moments ago, and you shouldn't have had time to even reach Alexander, let alone do all of the stuff you claimed. And he's not the only one that's confused. Everyone outside of Alexander says that you all just left a moment ago. It's almost like time stopped when you stepped through the barrier around the primal. And if that's the case, Quickthinks seeing into the future might not be all that crazy. Mide thinks that there may be a simpler explanation, at least when it comes to how Quickthinks predicted your moves. There's a machine inside of Alexander that's made to do very complicated math problems, and using it to determine the probability of something happening isn't that far-fetched. But that only worked for simple events. It actually makes a lot more sense that there are some time shenanigans going on. For now, it's all only a theory, but Wedge thinks that it's possible that Alexander has distorted time inside of the barrier, and it's possible that the Illuminati know that and they're using it to their advantage. They may even be using the primal to somehow bend time to their will. If they're doing that, then your mission was destined to fail from the very beginning. The doom and gloom speculation starts to bother Biggs, and he decides that it might be a good idea to call Sid and see what he thinks might be going on. It's hard to explain over a link pearl, so Sid and Ishtola head back to the camp to chat. Before anyone can fill them in, Alexander causes the land to shake, so you all race off to see what the primal's doing. From what Ishtola can see, without its core, the primal is starting to break down, but it's doing it very slowly. Using her goggles, Sid sees something even stranger. The ether that was leaking out of the damaged primal started flowing in reverse, like time started passing backwards, something that should be impossible, but since none of you know much about the primal, there's no telling what it can actually do. And to make matters worse, it could be undoing everything you did to shut down the cores. If the Illuminati can simply reset your progress on a whim, beating them will be all but impossible. And to make matters even worse, with Round Rocks in hand and the final piece of the Codex, Quickthinks and the Illuminati gain full control of Alexander. All that's left is for them to wait for the final core to power up, then they'll be able to unleash Alexander's full potential. That won't just give them the power to remake the world as it currently is, they'll have control over time, and that'll give them the ability to rewrite history itself. Mide's been extremely worried about Round Rocks, which has her pacing back and forth a lot. During one of her random walks, she saw something out of the corner of her eye that looks a lot like the cat Shanoa that's always been hanging around Quickthinks. If the cat's there, then it's likely that the Illuminati aren't too far behind, so naturally the two of you go to track it down. The two of you find the cat, and sure enough, an Illuminati spy isn't far off. Sid and Ishtola take him out, but not before he starts bragging about how once they activate the final core of Alexander, they'll be able to travel through time and be unstoppable. The whole thing sounds crazy to Sid, but the goblins seem positive that Quickthinks was a prophet from the future sent to fix history. What makes this situation even worse is he claims that the battle for the future's already been won, at least according to the Enigma Codex. It's depressing to think about it, but it would explain why Quickthinks seems to already know what you were going to do. And if it is true, it will make your entire fight with the Illuminati pointless. Backrix thinks all of this talk is nonsense, and he's more interested in hearing your plans on dealing with the current situation. Ishtola and Sid had been getting things set up for their final assault, with the help of Matoya of course, when the cat Mide had been following had came into the cave and acted like it wanted them to follow it. They had, and it had led them right to the Illuminati spy. It was a happy coincidence, but since the tiny cat's been with Quickthinks constantly, Sid refuses to believe that it turned on its master at random. Either it switched sides, or Quickthinks is setting you all up. If the thing could talk, Sid would want to question it, and since it can't really hurt to try, he tells the cat to meow twice for yes and once for no. Then he asks if it's Quickthinks' cat. It actually answers yes, so Mide asks if it wants to go back home, and it answers no. That makes Sid start to think that it really can understand them. However, that doesn't mean that she's not still working for Quickthinks. While that may be true, Backrix remembers Round Rock saying that she had saw a black cat watching her 3 years ago when she had first found the piece of the Enigma Codex. That had seemed like useless information back then, but now Backrix is starting to wonder if Shanoa is the exact same cat. But if it had been, then it would be full grown by now, unless it somehow jumped through time. It all sounds ridiculous, even to Ishtola who suggested it, but it can't be ruled out. And if that's the case, it could mean that Quickthinks has been manipulating things as far back as Mide's first summoning of Alexander, which means you're all likely screwed. Talking about the problem's not really doing anything to fix it, so Sid thinks that your best option is to just head back into Alexander and see what you can find. And Wedge being Wedge, he's made something that should help you get through the barrier and back into the primal. He's running the last tests on the device now, so the Warrior of Light and the others head off to meet him. Wedge knows that he went a little overboard with the last invention, but he's positive that his next one will work exactly how it's supposed to. The plan is simple. You'll be attacking the primal from 2 angles again. Ishtola's working on cutting off Alexander's ether supply, while the Warrior of Light's going to go and rescue Round Rocks. Without her, the Illuminati won't be able to control time, so that'll even the playing field, hopefully. You'll be heading in through Alexander's head with the help of Wedge's new device, something that he's named Barrier Begone, which is supposed to, you guessed it, remove Mide's barrier. The problem is, once the barrier's gone, Alexander will be free to move, so you'll need to do what you're doing fast, or things are going to go wrong very, very quickly. Sid's gonna fly you as close as he can to the top of the primal, then you're gonna go in and clear the way for the rest of them. Once you've done that, you need to get back to the ship so Wedge can turn the barrier back on. All of that needs to be done before Alexander can move, so no pressure. This is hardly the most dangerous thing that the Warrior of Light's done, so he and his adventurer buddies head in. Once the barrier drops, they all rush in, fighting against swarms of goblins as they make their way to the top of the primal and inside, where even more of the Illuminati's toys try to bar their way. Toys that the Warrior of Light takes great pride in destroying. With the path into the top of the primal clear, Sid and the others reactivate the barrier, leaving the top of Alexander's head outside, which gives you a way back in to make your next attack once you're ready. Y'shtola's glad to see that at least one of your missions was accomplished. Cutting off Alexander's ether supply didn't work at all, and she thinks Mide might be able to help her understand why since she summoned the thing. All primals constantly draw ether from the surrounding land, both to make themselves stronger and to keep their physical forms. She and Matoya had figured that they could create a barrier between the land's ether and Alexander using some device called Arcanima that she had Sid put around the area. The devices are working fine, but for some reason Alexander isn't being hindered by them at all. Mide may know why, but she can't fully see how it'll matter all that much. When she was younger, a man that she didn't know came up to her and told her that anything she wanted could be hers if she listened to him. A grown person telling a random kid that should be a big old red flag, but not all kids are given the stranger danger talk. They definitely should be, especially with all the crazies running around now. If Mide's parents had told her not to talk to strangers, we probably could have avoided dealing with the cult and their time-traveling primal, but they didn't, so here we are. She didn't understand what the man was talking about, but he had told her to reunite the shards of the Enigma Codex and perform the sacred rite before the ruins that stand against the river's flow. Then her hopes and dreams would all become a reality. After that, he gave her a horn to use as a catalyst for the summoning and told her that it was a gift from Travanchet. Then he left. Y'shtola's had some run-ins with the man before, and as you may have guessed, he's an Ascian. The horn was supposedly a relic with the power to manipulate ether in the air. The Scions had hunted it for a while since it could be deadly in the wrong hands, and if it's being used by Alexander's third core to draw ether, then there's no way to stop it from drawing ether from anywhere on the star. That means you'll just have to break the core the old-fashioned way, but that won't stop the Illuminati from simply rewinding time to undo everything you've done. All in all, nothing's changed. Your only course of action is to save Round Rocks. The Circle of Knowing had given Y'shtola the mission of recovering the horn, and not only did she fail, it was her failure that caused it to fall into Travanchet's hands. She feels that this incident is as much her fault as anyone else's, so she's more than willing to help in any way that she can. Which means it's time to rescue Round Rocks, or at least to try. From above, Quick Thinks is watching you all like he still knows what you're planning, and oddly enough, Backrix notices that his tiny black cat is still with him, which means that the one that's standing next to you all couldn't be his. So he decides to rename it Schrodinger. That's a very on-the-nose thing to name the cat, and if you don't know why, it's a little bit of real-world lore that I guess I will go into. Schrodinger's cat in simple terms is a thought experiment done by Erwin Schrodinger, where you hypothetically put a cat in a box with radioactive material that may or may not be released after a certain amount of time. After a while, as long as the box isn't open, the cat exists in two states at the same time. It's both alive and dead. It'll stay like that until someone opens the box to definitively prove that the cat is in one state or the other. Now you can figure out on your own what that means in regards to this story. Regardless of how weird the cat situation is, Biggs and the others did get a good look around the inside of Alexander, which let them figure out where Round Rocks is being kept. She's in the central core, and from what Biggs could see, all you'll need to do is ride one of those floating platforms there. Of course they'll be guarded, so the Warrior of Light will head back in through Alexander's head, while the others travel through Midas to make sure the Illuminati don't have any traps waiting to ambush you. Once you've gotten your hands on one of the platforms, Biggs and Wedge will do what they do best and cause a distraction. With all the talking done, you all get to work. As expected, there's no small amount of goblins working hard to stop you from interfering with their plans, and their tech and fighting skill makes things a little bit difficult. But after taking down the mercenary named Lame Brick Strikebox, the Warrior of Light has a clear path to Round Rocks. Ishtola, Sid, and Mide had to deal with a few goblins of their own, but it wasn't too much trouble, and you all find Round Rock safe and sound sitting in a chair right next to the Enigma Codex, directly above the third core of Alexander. The amount of ether Ishtola can see pumping through the core is outright terrifying, and all that power has been being used by Round Rocks, which has made the little goblin a little unstable, but it has given her the ability to alter time. Hearing that it really is true, Mide wonders out loud if she genuinely could fix her mistakes from 3 years ago. So Round Rocks, trying to be a good friend, decides to help and activates Alexander, spinning time backwards despite everyone telling her not to. Biggs, Wedge, and Backrix get a front row seat for the trip since they're on top of the Primal, and they're pretty shocked when Sid tells them that they're being sent back in time. They appear along with Alexander right at the moment when Mide and her friends were summoning the Primal. They're excited because they think that what they're doing worked, but it's short-lived because Alexander activates and the Illuminati shoots Mide's friends. Alexander starts trying to suck Mide inside, but Dayan pushes her out of the way, getting sucked into the Primal in her place. Backrix finds the whole thing fascinating, and he's writing it all in his book until Schrodinger knocks it out of his hands, and both the cat and the book fall off of the Primal right as Mide of the past activated her barrier. Whatever Round Rocks did ends, and you're all snapped back to your own time, and QuickThink shows up to brag about how once again you've done exactly what was written. Ironically enough, it seems like Sid and the others still haven't figured things out, so QuickThink decides to break it down for them. Time is a circle, or a wheel, and everything you've done or will do has already happened, and you're just completing the loop. In other words, when Mide and her friends summoned Alexander 3 years ago, what they had actually seen were you all traveling back through time. Hearing that makes Mide realize that what had happened to her and her friends was destined to happen, and there was never anything she could have done to fix it. More goblins show up, so Ishtola decides that it's time to retreat since you do have Round Rocks, but knowing that everything she's done is pointless, Mide decides to stay behind. There's nothing you can do about it right now, so you all head out before you get captured. Or killed. Biggs and the others are happy to see Round Rocks, but now that Mide's with the Illuminati, Round Rocks wants to go back for her. Sid had never planned on leaving the woman there, but first you all need to make a plan, so they call Jesse to pick them up. The day brought a lot of painful revelations, especially since the Illuminati had planned out everything from the incident 3 years ago to now, and they had used all of you to do it. But worst of all, the one thing that had kept Mide going was a hope of seeing Dayan again. And now she knows that'll never happen because there's definitely nothing left of the man. This whole mission has been going poorly, but it's not a complete loss. You saved Round Rocks, and without her the Illuminati can't turn time backwards, which means it's time to destroy Alexander's final core, and this time it should be permanent. With the risk of everything you do being undone dealt with, the Warrior of Light and his allies head to Alexander's final core. The defenses that the Illuminati have put in place are top-notch, complete with the Cruise Chaser, which is the Illuminati version of the Transformer Starscream, an amount that really should have been a reward for this fight instead of something that's put on the Mog Station. After destroying the Illuminati's very expensive machine in a fight that Sid and the others watch from a safe distance away, you all get an up-close look at Alexander's third core, and Sid sees just how massive it is. For it to get that big, it must have been drawing in ether at a super fast rate, and with the power that it's stored up, it'll probably be able to regenerate itself even faster than you can break it. Instead of wasting time trying, Sid figures that since the control room has a way to control the Primal, it should have a way to turn it off too. Of course, that'll mean bringing Round Rocks back since she's the only one who can use the Enigma Codex. It's not something that any of you really want to put her through again, but QuickThink needs to be stopped, and you can't really think of another way. Speak of the devil and he will appear, and sure enough, QuickThink shows up with his book and cat in tow, claiming that the future shows that things are going to end very badly for you all regardless of your plans. All other passages to the control room are blocked, so to get there you'll have to go right where QuickThink wants you to, and his predictions say that you all die on your attempt. He goes to float away, but as he does, his cat knocks the book out of his hand and falls down in front of you all, similar to what happened with Backrix. Backrix picks up the book that QuickThink has been carrying around, and he realizes that it's actually his journal, the one that had been knocked out of his hand when you all took a trip to the past. So the entire time, the only reason QuickThink has known what was going to happen was because he had the book that Backrix had written about your whole mission. In other words, he's not a prophet at all. All of his predictions came from the book. Granted, this book thing is a big time paradox in itself, since Quick Thinks couldn't have gotten the book until after Backrix wrote the book, but the things that Backrix wrote in the book were a direct result of what Quick Thinks did after having the book. But since thinking like that would give all of us a headache, we're just gonna let this little time snafu slide. What's even more confusing than the book is why Shanoa, who is also Schrodinger, set all of this nonsense into motion. For starters, the cat should have died from falling off of the primal, but fall damage has only killed like 3 people in the game so far, so I can let that part slide too. Quick Thinks must have found the cat when he found the book, and he decided to take her in, but that still doesn't explain why the cat is causing all of these time shenanigans by knocking the book around so much. Figuring that out won't help with dealing with Alexander's core, and that's the only thing that Sid is concerned about at the moment. And since the pages in the journal don't say anything about you all dying on your trip to the control room, Sid is ready to get things set up to destroy Alexander for good, so you all head out to get prepared. Things are not as good as you may think, however. Even though Quick Thinks lost the book and Round Rocks, he's apparently had the power to use the Enigma Codex all along, and he activates it so he'll be ready for when you come back. Once you're all as prepared as you can be, the Warrior of Light, Sid, Biggs, and Wedge head back into the primal to attack the core. Quick Thinks is ready for you all, and he stops time, summons a smaller version of Alexander, and sets it to fire on you all while you can't move. Time restarts, giving you all just enough time to avoid taking a point-blank Kamehameha to the face, which would have definitely murdered you all. Since the sneak attack failed, the mini Alexander vanishes into a rift in time, one that stays open. Instead of waiting around for it to reappear and hit you all with another sneak attack, one that you might not be able to dodge, the Warrior of Light heads into the rift to fight it, while Sid and the others clear a path to the control room. Fighting this thing that's the embodiment of Alexander's power is not something easily overcome. The Primal takes this fight as a test to determine whether or not you deserve to have a future, which if you fail, I'm pretty sure that you'd be dead, so you don't really have a choice but to win. Which of course you do. When the Warrior of Light pops back out of the rift, Ishtola and Round Rocks both have joined Sid and the others. So with the way clear, you all head into the control room, where Quick Thinks is more than happy to reveal that he has always been able to control the primal, so nothing can stop him from rewinding time. A surprisingly still alive Mide makes her entrance by shooting Quick Thinks' guards, and since he revealed that he can control the Codex without Round Rocks, she understands why he had used the girl instead of doing it himself from the start. Controlling the primal at full power could very likely destroy the person who tried, so he hadn't wanted to risk his own life until he didn't have a choice. But he is controlling it now, and he thinks that nothing can stop him, so Mide proves him wrong by shooting him in the head. With him down, that gives Round Rocks the chance to undo what Quick Thinks has started and shut down the primal's final core. Without it constantly drawing in ether, Alexander has started burning through what it had stored pretty fast, and it won't be long before it shuts down and fades away entirely. Something none of you want to be around for, but before you head out, Round Rocks wants to know how did Mide survive after you all left. She's not all that sure herself. The place had started shaking and she'd gotten thrown somewhere dark. She had been unconscious there until a few minutes ago. She had probably gotten knocked down a garbage chute or something, but all that really matters is that she's okay. With the mission a success, it's past time for you all to head home. But of course things can't possibly be that simple, and what should have been a very dead Quick Thinks reaches out and activates the Enigma Codex again. Apparently he had done a lot of tinkering on his own body, and what you had thought was a weird looking mask turns out to actually be his head. A head that can survive a point-blank gunshot. The Goblin reactivates the core and attempts to use Alexander's power to go back to the past, but the Primal decides not to obey him, something that it's apparently been able to do all along. It also does something that you failed to do, and finishes off Quick Thinks. It makes Sid think that the Primal has a mind of its own, which it does, and just like Mide had thought, that mind belongs to Dan. He's really been in there the whole time watching over her, but the two of them only get to talk for a moment before the core overloads and starts to draw in ether so fast that Ishtola's afraid that it'll drain Eorzea dry in a few minutes if it's not stopped. With it being in the state that it's in, she doesn't think that any of you can stop it now. But Mide thinks that this was all part of Dayan's plan, and she realizes what he wanted her to do, and that is throw herself into the core. She merges with it, and she tells you all to leave as she's drawn into what Dayan calls Alexander's dream. It's a place outside of time where Alexander watches the past, present, and future, seeing each and every possible outcome for every situation. And since he's a part of the primal, Dan sees it all too. Since Alexander was born from the desire to create a perfect world, it's watched everything unfold to see what path would give the result that it wanted. It saw everything from the Illuminati ruling things to what would have happened if he had stepped in and stopped Bahamut. And after studying every possible outcome, it realized that the only chance there was for a perfect world to be born was if Alexander himself ceased to exist. So it decided to erase itself, since the amount of ether that it consumes by just existing would eventually destroy everything. So instead of taking that risk, it decided to leave the fate of the world in the hands of the Warrior of Light. Having seen him in action, Mide can understand why. Knowing that he would eventually be the source of a major calamity, Alexander sent the cat Shanoa out to put time back on the right path. With that done, there's only one task left. Since the horn was a part of the third core of Alexander, it would be able to regrow itself instantly by drawing in ether from all around the world. The only way to stop it is to seal it away in a moment in time that would loop forever and ever. And that will trap Mide and Dan as well. Something she's perfectly fine with. Outside, Biggs and Wedge notice that everything inside of Alexander's barrier has stopped moving, like time's frozen in place. Round Rocks and the others have made their way back to Idleshire, and while none of them are happy about Mide's fate, she did stop Alexander, so that's a good thing at least. Round Rocks is of course taking this hard, and she runs off somewhere, so you all go to track her down. It's not hard to find her since she isn't exactly hiding, she just wanted to be alone to think. When you all were running out of Alexander, she had found the glowstone in her pocket, but it won't glow for her anymore. Sid thinks it's because the experience that she had with the Illuminati changed her view of the world. The Enigma Codex was made from one man's desire to build a perfect world, and its knowledge is sealed off from anyone who doesn't fully believe in what it promotes. Both Quick Thinks and Mide, when she was younger, never questioned the teachings of the Codex, but after what happened, Round Rocks can't really blindly follow anything anymore. The glowstone staying dark in her hands is a sign of her growing into adulthood. That doesn't mean she has to quit dreaming of a better world, but it's time for her to start working on building it with her own hands. Since she was working on that anyway, she's perfectly fine with that. She just wishes she could give the glowstone back to Mide since the woman had liked it so much. But with time being frozen inside of the barrier, that would be impossible. Except for the fact that the cat Shanoa shows up again, and she's been able to come and go freely within Alexander with no problems. Since it can't really hurt to try, Round Rocks gives the cat the stone and lets her take it to her friend, while you all wonder if Mide will ever find her way out of Alexander. They do have access to every moment in time, so they may find one where they can step out and live their life without Alexander potentially destroying the world. But for now, Ishtola and Sid both have their own stuff to do, so they head off, but not before Ishtola hands you a book that Backrix has been looking for. Since you like delivering stuff, she figures that you won't mind. The goblin's happy to get the book, but he's surprised when he reads about a tribe from a long time ago, founded by two people who stepped out of a giant machine with a glowing stone in their hands. And their names were Dan and Mide. So apparently they found their perfect world somewhere deep in the past, and they managed to get Round Rocks' gift too. This concludes the story of Alexander. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, and donate to the channel so I can keep bringing you guys new content. Until next time, guys. Later.